Good evening. My name is Count Fuckula. Yes. Vampires. Hello you nerds! So good to see your terrified faces. Welcome back to the channel. On today's episode we're going to be talking about how vampires are used to depict the queer in media. This is a very deep rabbit hole to go down on, so what better era to start with than Dracula from 1931. This movie is so gay. Dracula only goes after the men, he explicitly says he wishes to pleasure them in his castle, he is flamboyant and campy.
Come.
Be honest, how many of you would actually go and watch this film to prove me wrong? Film is like 90 years old. For all you know, this is all true. None of it is. Alright, in all seriousness, what can we learn from depictions of vampires in media? The illusions of queer. Vampires, in a very weird way, are often alluded to be different, but romantic, camp, but dangerous. We see them portrayed as something that has a human basis, but something about them makes them different. Vampires are also completely and utterly romanticized in any sort of fiction that you could come across. Weirdly enough, they're often shown to be lonely souls, longing to make a person just like them and take them to eternal suffering with them. Take this quote, for example. Queer coding monsters is nothing new. Monster stories are often allegories for social outcasts of one kind or another. Vampires have been used as metaphors for xenophobia, anti-Semitism, and class tension. But queerness has always been an especially popular interpretation. They are androgynous creatures of the night. They can be predatory or tragic, craving human flesh in forbidden ways. If you're inclined towards psychoanalysis, the conflicting imagery of penetrating teeth and sucking mouths is easy to interpret as a sexual innuendo. That is from an article detailing vampirism and gay subtext, link in description. I would like to remind everybody right now to please subscribe if you're new here, like, comment, and share the video so you can tell all of your friends about how gay vampires are. Now, I've already covered Interview with the Vampire about how the whole story is basically just about two gay men in a forbidden relationship adopting a child together. That's exactly what it is. Vampires are an incredibly easy way to queer code any character within your story. Why are they acting so strange? Vampire. Why do they wear fancy gowns and read erotic novels? Vampire. Why do they have sex with the same sex? Vampire. Anything you could think of that can be stereotyped as being queer can be explained with them being a vampire. Vampires are often also depicted as sex positive, and because of this it makes sense why religious bodies despise the idea and are the opposing forces for vampirism, especially Christianity. As we're all aware, the Holy Cross often deters vampires, as they are everything that is unholy. What else does Christianity, in general terms at least, consider unholy? Sex before marriage, homosexuality. Should I even go on? This is a bit of a leap, but of course vampires are unholy within religion because of their queerness. Their very essence depicts that which goes against every aspect of a holy life. I'm sure many of my viewers would be able to relate to this. Spooky mug. Queer bloodsuckers. Twilight isn't considered a queer movie, at least in my circles, but despite having a straight relationship between Edward and Bella, Edward being the vampire of course, he initiates the sex. But it isn't until Jacob comes along that makes the series a little gay, as Jacob provides a third dynamic for Bella, but at the same time, there is an argument to be made for the sexual tension that forms between Jacob and Edward. I think they would both be better off if they just admitted that they hate each other, then settle their differences and be best friends after that. Moving on to Dracula while the story of Dracula doesn't exactly scream gay, a lot of its elements can be credited back to the time it was conceived in. Bram Stoker wrote Dracula as a charismatic freak who longs for women and England. I don't know why. But also makes men his servants to pursue anything he desires them to do. The subtext is there, and it doesn't help how most of its adaptations depict Dracula as rather camp. Bela Lugosi's performance of the character is incredibly charismatic and could be considered stereotypically queer. It isn't until the BBC's adaptation of Dracula from a few years ago that this queerness is called out on. Here is a quote for you to chew on. No, the horror of the vampire is sexual. Worse, it is sexual in all the wrong ways. It is beautiful, charming, even occasionally funny and likable, but definitely abnormal. This allows the vampire to become a conduit for cultural anxieties concerning queerness within society. As a creature that straddles the binaries of life and death, drawing attraction and repulsion, the vampire queers both gender and sexuality. Stories about vampires can reflect and dramatize cultural anxieties surrounding queerness across both time periods and mediums. This is an essay called Not Just Dead, but Gay, Queerness and the Vampire by William A. Tringali? Link in description to that as well. Tringali goes on to say, the vampire is both beautiful and terrifying. Bridging this queer boundary of definition allows it to express a more complex version of non-binarized sexuality. The very nature of the vampire's attack, its bite, its queerness in this case, pertaining to anything regarding gender and sexuality that is non-normative. The vampire's bite is its means of both feeding and reproduction, making elongation, penetration, and fluid exchange commonplace within the novels it occupies, allowing a metaphoric discussion of sex without mentioning it. Combine this with its defining characteristic of being beautiful, yet dangerous. Being queer becomes an integral part of constructing the vampire. Tringali described it way better than I ever could. Are you convinced yet? Vampires are queer. Vampires are very, very queer. They blend into normal society just like queer people would. They are beautiful but considered dangerous. This is, of course, the religious coding employed to portray vampires. As we all know, religion is especially the biggest of the vampire's foes. Christianity considers queerness dangerous. Now, I know that not everyone who is religious immediately thinks of queer people as a danger to society. I don't mean to place everybody under one big homophobic umbrella, but we all know that Christianity isn't the biggest fan by any means. And hey, if you're religious and you're all in support of queerness, more power to you. Make yourself heard. Speak for your mind. Speak your mind. And show people that you indeed can be a person with common decency towards other people, and still respect your own beliefs. Queer substitutes. Back in the day, and even to this day, if as a writer you wanted to include a queer character within your story, the easiest method for this was to make them a vampire. We've already talked about why, but just to recap, they blend in well to normal society as they look just like humans, they are sex positive and have an easy pass for deciding to ignore religious teachings. And finally, because their whole attack is sexual and queer in its nature, the biting of the neck. So vampires are queer substitutes. You can't have actual gay people in your story for whatever reason? Throw in a vampire. I'm aware that this video is brief in describing why vampires are very, very, very queer, but I also believe that it's concise and straight to the point. I didn't want to go over every single depiction of every single vampire of what makes them queer, but a generalized term would be much better off. I think that the reason that vampires are such a unique monster type in general is because of the fact that they are very clearly still human, in appearance at least, and are very charismatic. You don't see or hear of many monsters that retain charisma, but are still incredibly dangerous. And this is what makes vampires incredibly unique. Thank you all for watching this video on vampires and queerness. If you liked the video, please like the video. If you didn't like it, subscribe to catch all the shenanigans that occur on this very horror-themed and queer-themed channel. I wish you all the best of luck and happy spooky time. Spooky time!